Good afternoon. My name is Gauthier. I'm Director of the Generation and Gender Program, the GGP, and I'm based at NIDI in The Hague. The GGP is a research infrastructure that collects, archives, and disseminates data on people and families. This includes data on gender, work-family balance, and relationships. Our archives include data from more than 25 countries and has more than 4,000 users worldwide. But before I go further, let me show you a 2-minute video that we have prepared and that further explains.
The Generations and Gender Programme is an international research infrastructure for high-quality and open-source data. We monitor life and family dynamics within society at the individual level. Family life has always been a reflection of societal changes. Our life courses differ greatly from those of previous generations. Young adults have many more options nowadays, and many more pressures, especially as they try to combine work, family, and social life. This means that an increasing percentage of young adults don't follow the sequence of the traditional life course of leaving home, getting married, and then having children, or postpone the events till a later age. GGP data show that in 1985 in Western Europe, about 50% of 30-year-olds followed this traditional path. 20 years later, only about a quarter of young people fit this traditional pattern. Policymakers need to know how to support young adults as their lives unfold. To provide this support, we need to know the causes and consequences of change in people's lives. High-quality data and innovations are needed to answer these and other questions. This is where GGP comes into play. GGP takes the dynamic complexity of real people's families and lives and makes it accessible as high-quality, comparable data sets to researchers, policymakers, and civil society. Its focus on the complexity of family life across different countries is what makes the GGP a unique data resource in understanding rapid and profound social change. We curate these data sets to help others address pressing societal challenges. Our data sets are invaluable for formulating good policy. We provide access to these data sets to an ever wider audience. We do this because we believe this contributes to a better match between the realities of people's needs and the public policies designed to support them. To follow our research and to benefit from GGP's expanding datasets, contact us.
What we do. So, in a nutshell, what the GGP is an infrastructure with detailed life histories on people, more than 25 countries, fully documented, open access, and with very high impact. Having said that, let me now turn to the two key questions for this session. How do we make our data fair? And especially, why is fair important for us? Our data is fair in the sense that it's findable. We have a data citation, DOI, that we recommend users to use. The data, importantly, is accessible for online browsing for all and downloadable individual level data for registered users, who are non-commercial users. It's interoperable in the sense that we have fully documented the data set using DDI standards, and the data is reusable, being archived at downs. So while this is not unique to the GGP and is becoming the standard among all social science infrastructure, there are two reasons why for us it was important to make our data fair. First, the use of common instruments, meaning here a common questionnaire and fieldwork guidelines, means very high cross-national comparability. This is highly valued by researchers. For example, to see if changes in families or life course are of a global nature, observed in all countries, or instead specific to some countries. Or they use it to test more broadly theories that were developed on single countries. Over the years, this has resulted in very high scientific and societal impact. In turn, the use of common instruments means also economies of scale for countries fielding our survey, in the sense that they do not have to invest themselves in developing their own instrument. Second, the single data portal where user can find data for all countries tend to increase the usage of specific datasets. This is something that funders obviously highly appreciated. It also results in high number of users, which is for us a good impact indicator. But it's important to realize that was not always so. A good example is the work that we are currently doing in trying to find older surveys on families that were carried out in the 70s and 80s. Not only they were not cross-nationally comparable, but often have not been systematically archived. In some cases, we're even finding the datasets have been lost. Tracking these datasets is therefore very important. In short, the FAIR principles are central to the GGP, but it's important to realize that to achieve this goal, it requires a major investment upfront in the sense of developing survey instruments and guidelines, and especially ensuring country compliances to these guidelines. It requires also a major investment afterwards in the sense of dissemination work, making sure people are aware of our data, responding to users' query, being responsive to the scientific community, and tracking our impact. We do so in collaboration with our own GGP partners and users, but also by working closely with other research infrastructure, for example, Odyssey in the Netherlands and SHOC at the European level. In closing, I would encourage you to check our website and do not hesitate to contact me for a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, for this presentation on the Generation and Gender program. I will add you to the stream as well. You're here with us today to answer questions. So I'm encouraging people to put questions in the chat. I have not yet seen any questions. So I'm wondering about two things. One is you mentioned already that quite a lot of the FAIR aspects have been addressed. What do you think is the biggest challenge that you still have to tackle with the GGP?
Actually, it's widely accepted in our community, the idea of open access data. I think where the challenge actually, strangely, is with our users. Getting them to cite properly the data is something, in a sense, much newer in our community, and something that users are used. They always have their bibliography, they cite all the authors. When it comes to data, they don't cite them, or they use various other names that even makes it difficult for us to track our impact. So that's not unique. I hear that from others, and I think this is where places like DANS, I think, can help further with us. It's not only an issue of depositing the data, but getting actually users to cite them after. Yeah. It's so important.
Yeah, because you mentioned that all the data does have a DOI, but indeed, users need to know and need to cite those as well. Yeah, so that is a very good point that I think is not necessarily only relevant for your researchers, but all users. There's a question in the chat on how the GDPR is influencing your research.
Yeah, it is, and especially since we have also we're collaborating with countries outside the European Union, so it makes it even more challenging, and some other speakers have been referring to that today. What we have done is obviously changing slightly our informed consent with participants, making it clear that their data, the data is depersonalized, not necessarily anonymized, and that's a big difference actually. So we've had to find ways of working with GDPR, but it's obviously so far has not been a major obstacle per se, but obviously forcing us to be more vigilant and more thorough in the way we're doing things.
Yeah. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but still something you need to do and requires efforts. Yeah. Thank you very much. Given the time, I would say we leave it at this. If there are more questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Thank you again, Anne, for sharing your insights on the Generation and Gender program.
Thanks a lot.